All right, good morning. My name is Dan Friedman. I'm a data center technical solutions architect. I work for Cisco's America's Partner Organization, and I support partners in the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. This video is intended to provide a demonstration or a walkthrough of Cisco Intersight. So here I'm actually logged into the cloud environment. There's a few limitations, primarily because I don't have administrative access to this. So this is really a read-only environment, which means I'm unable to create any new logical constructs or configurations in the system. However, it's still pretty useful for demonstrating the capabilities of Intersight. So one of the things that I would suggest as a prerequisite to watching this video is to watch my Introduction to Intersight presentation or video. That presentation provides background on Intersight components, architecture, the new Intersight managed mode for Fabric Interconnects and UCSX, and it covers baseline language and understanding that will be needed for this demo and walkthrough. One of the things that I like to do at the beginning of such a walkthrough, if you come up here to the very top, there's a help menu. And if we go to guided help and site tour, this is actually really useful because it just gives you a basic idea of baseline navigation in the system and critical functionality. So it's worth spending a couple of minutes to go through it. So up here at the top, you've got this menu button. If you click it, it'll basically collapse, and the only thing you will see are the icons here. So you'll see this set of stacked pieces of paper next to operate, and all the menus will be collapsed. So you'll just see a very thin menu here, just like this. Okay. And if you go to Monitor, then basically Monitor provides a set of read-only dashboards that you can use to monitor your infrastructure. Okay, get a status on your infrastructure. We're gonna go through all of this during this demo, so you can go ahead and read the description here. The Operate menu says View inventory details for your devices that summarize health, utilization, and configuration. The Configure menu allows you to configure profiles and policies to manage your devices, automate storage and virtualization tasks, and manage solutions to streamline operations. Optimize, view real-time workload demands and recommendation for ensuring application performance. View details of actions that are pending for your environment, run what-if scenarios, calculate and execute best placement for workloads, and generate reports. Based on your license subscription, view a list of claimed devices and perform administrative tasks. Now up here at the top, this highlighted section here are the alarms, so you can view and acknowledge alarms belonging to the devices in the current organization. In that case, organization is not referring to any kind of hierarchy in the sense that where you might be familiar with UCS organizations. That's not what this is referring to. Organization is a means of achieving multi-tenancy inside of Intersight instance. For details about the types of alarms reported and in Intersight and any exceptions, you can click on the alarms. When you click here, it'll open up a side panel, and you'll be able to filter your critical alarms, your warnings, and click on any one particular alarm to get more details. Next up, you've got requests. So this is where you can view and monitor the progress of user-initiated actions, deployments, and configuration tasks. So things like rebooting a server or applying a profile to a server or deploying a Kubernetes cluster, something along those lines. You get a status of what that looks like here. Next up, you've got your advisories. So view and acknowledge critical security advisories from the Cisco Security Advisory. That service identifies, monitors, and updates the status of the advisories to provide the latest information on impacted devices, the severity of the advisory, the impacted products, and any available workarounds. If there are no workarounds, you can open a support case with Cisco TAC for further assistance, and we'll be demonstrating that in this demo. Up here, you've got a search, so you can search for specific items. I typically don't use that for this for that purpose. There's other locations in the UI where you can search under maybe a more specific reduction of infrastructure. Here you've got the settings. So review historical changes to the system and audit logs, registered licenses, manage your settings, configure your account and access details from the settings page. So this includes things like accounts, users, groups, and roles, in other words, RBAC, potentially SSO. And it says here you can view and generate API keys and OAuth tokens, which is a essentials feature, and that refers to the licensing level that's needed to communicate with the API. This is the help menu that we just clicked on. It's helpful because you can basically link to intersight.com/help, which is what I normally use it for, which is a great website with lots of resources, all kinds of reference information, Intersight Handbook, licensing details, and so on. You can also submit feedback here, so if there's something you want to see in the system that doesn't exist in the system, by all means, send feedback. The business unit responsible for Intersight will receive that feedback and then basically prioritize it for development. Because this is a SaaS-based application, the new features roll out on a pretty frequent basis. And finally, you've got your profile information. So if you click and you go to user preferences, you can change your language in light mode or dark mode. And then above that, you've got a few options that basically lead you to your account details and such under settings. So a little bit of duplication there. Okay, so that's the basic tour and navigation, and we're going to be using that throughout the remainder of this demonstration. Now, one of the first things that you should do after you log in, you're going to have to create your organization for multiple tenancy. Inside of an organization, you can create accounts. You can have multiple accounts in an organization, and essentially that's how you achieve multi-tenancy. Those accounts determine sort of the breadth of infrastructure that you're able to manage. You've also got users, groups, and roles. Users belong to groups. Groups get assigned to roles, and that's how users are given permissions to achieve things administratively, operationally within the UI here. You want to apply your licenses so that you've got all the features that you need to basically get the system up and running per your requirements. So settings would be one of the first places that I visit, in particular for the licensing. One of the second things I would do is you're going to want to come down here to under the admin menu and click on targets. And targets are essentially destination systems that you wish to manage. These can be independent standalone UCS C-Series servers. They can be UCSM managed fabric interconnects, aka UCS domains. They can be IMM managed fabric interconnects. In other words, UCS domains, but for the X series rather than the B series. And there's some differences there that are covered in another presentation that I've done. So what else? Storage units, third-party storage. You can claim your Hyperflex. You can claim your hypervisor managers. And when you claim something, you're basically onboarding that destination system into the management realm of Intersight. So once you do that, you're going to have to give the system a little bit of time basically to perform inventory. So for example, if you have just set up a target pointed at vCenter, Intersight's going to communicate with vCenter, inventory all of the virtual machines in vCenter, pull down all the metadata so that basically you can manage all of those VMs and report on those from within Intersight. So the way that targets work is covered basically inside my Introduction to Intersight presentation, but I'll give a quick review of it here. So in a destination machine, like let's say a Cisco UCS C-Series server, you would log into the SIMC, you would then go under the admin menu and look for device connector, and on that screen you would find a device ID and a claim code. And then you would come here to targets, and again, I don't have administrative access to this, but there would be a button here that basically says create a new target. You click that, and then it's going to ask you for your device ID and your claim code. And what that's going to allow you to do is it essentially authenticates the remote device and establishes a permanent tunnel of communication between intersight.com and your on-prem equipment. There's no VPN, there's no poking holes inbound inside your firewalls to allow this communication to occur, and that's because the destination device connector establishes an outbound connection via HTTPS, and that's either a direct connection out through your firewall to the internet if outbound traffic is allowed, and if not, then that can be directed through a proxy. All right, so once you've got all your targets set up, that's when the real fun happens. So unfortunately, I'd like to be able to show when you click on create a new target, it gives you categories of things you can add. Storage, compute, hypervisors, different types of UCS domains, and so on that you can choose from. So you choose the device type, and then you provide the necessary information. One thing that I should note there about setting up third-party device targets is that you will have to specify an Intersight Assist appliance that you want to route your traffic through on-prem in order to talk to those third-party devices. So again, that's covered in my Introduction to Intersight presentation video. All right, so once you've got your targets set up, then it's time to get down to business and really talk about what is Intersight capable of, and let's give kind of a tour of the interface. So to start, before I start pointing and clicking around, whenever I think of infrastructure, I always think of it in a certain order. So in my mind, all of IT sort of starts with a network. Why? Because everything connects to the network. Without a network, you can't even manage all of the other equipment in your data center. So at bare minimum, when you're building a site, for example, the first thing you do is install the network. Maybe the second thing that you do is you plug your storage arrays into your network, your IP management network, assign an IP on the management interface of your storage array, and now you can configure your storage array. Similarly, you might plug your compute system management interface into the management network, and that way you can configure your compute. So I tend to think of network as being either Ethernet and or fiber channel, depending on the requirements of that particular data center. Next is storage, because you can't stand up a lot of compute without storage, especially if they're booting from SAN. So storage is typically broken down into block and file. Then you've got your compute, which in this case, right, we're really specifically talking about Cisco UCS and or Hyperflex compute. And then once the compute is online, then you can install an operating system. And this is the virtualization layer and or hypervisor. In our case, hypervisors that we can run on our VMs include ESX, Hyper-V, and Intersect Workload Engine. And then finally, nowadays we also have to consider that not everything's a VM. Now we have applications that run in containers, and so there's maybe an additional layer there, which is Kubernetes. So if we look at the operate menu here, you'll notice that it has all of those elements. So we'll start with network, then we'll go to storage, then we'll talk about compute, specifically UCS. And if you're familiar with UCS and you're sort of familiar with like the topology diagram of how those components are installed and connected to each other, you know that at the top, you've got the fabric interconnects. Downstream, you have your chassis connected via the I/O modules, and then within the chassis, you have the servers. So here you sort of have the full stack of physical equipment that you can, that's involved in any particular UCS domain. You also have your Hyperflex clusters. And then, like I said, after you've got done with compute, you're down to your operating system, your virtualization, your hypervisor, and then Kubernetes, which would be your containers. So hopefully when you think of operational tasks across the sort of gamut of infrastructure in your data center, this navigation starts to make some good sense. All right, so we're going to start up here on the monitor tab, however. And like I said, this is basically a read-only series of dashboards. Again, similar concepts. We've got storage, we've got compute, specifically our fabric interconnects and our servers. We've got more compute, our Hyperflex clusters, and we also have some dashboards for other functionality, namely Intersight Workload Optimizer and an integration with UCS Director. It is a capability of Intersight. So we're not going to spend any time on Workload Optimizer, UCS Director, or even Intersight Cloud Orchestrator, ICO, although I will point them out inside the UI, because those are separate modules that are fairly robust in functionality and really deserve a walkthrough video of their own. Okay, so here on the storage tab, we can see the top 5 storage arrays by capacity utilization, top 5 storage volumes by capacity utilization. Anywhere you see a link or you see a filter, it's clickable, and it will reduce the view or focus the view on the thing that you're clicking. Same with fabric interconnects, right? We have a lot of fabric interconnects. We can see, how many are healthy, how many have critical alarms, how many have warning alarms. These here correspond to these alarms up here, but these are just the fabric interconnect alarms, and these are all of the alarms on the system. Okay, same with servers, same with Hyperflex clusters. So you get a dashboard view. You can add a dashboard by clicking the plus sign, and then once you do, it's going to open up this widgets library. So maybe you want to add a widget for your server hardware compatibility list status summary. So you can select that widget, say add widget. We'll go ahead and add that to your dashboard. We can go ahead and close out this add widget library, and we can go ahead and rename this and just call it, we'll just call it HCL. Okay, so there's a number. So here's our HCL tab, and here's our server HCL status summary. So you can come back, you can add additional widgets to your dashboard, and this basically just allows you the flexibility to create whatever dashboards you like, to view whatever information you prefer, high-level status information, leveraging the widgets from the library. Okay, so we'll go ahead and delete this because we don't need to keep it. So that's basically monitor. So if we go to operate, then under networking, we have to think about, what would we potentially do under networking? Modern Cisco solutions include Cisco ACI and NXOS. So with Cisco ACI, you have what are referred to as sites, or in a particular site or location, you would deploy an ACI fabric, which consists of a minimum of 3 APIC controllers, and then a number of spine and leaf switches to create the fabric. Okay, so that's one functionality that would exist under networking. The other is for NXOS, and NXOS fabrics are often these days managed by DCNM, which has been rebranded Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller. So if we look under networking here, you'll see that there's a tab for sites and there's a tab for Nexus Dashboard. So this is like the ACI side of things, and this is the NXOS side of things. And here you can see we've got a whole bunch of APICs. We can see that they're connected, which means that the device connector within the APIC is successfully communicating to Intersight.com via the SaaS service. This one here shows that it was unclaimed, so that's going back to the target setup of needing to claim that device and put in the device ID and claim code. You get other information like management IPs and firmware version running on those APICs, etc. And then under Nexus dashboards, Nexus dashboard is really a series of typically physical, but it can be virtual nodes that form a cluster, and then on that cluster you run various applications. Those applications consist of Nexus Dashboard Insight 6.0, which is a combination of assurance and advisory and I forget. Assurance, advisory, and other analytic functions within that application. You've also got Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator, which is basically the rebranded name for Multi-Site Orchestrator on the ACI side. And then you have NDFC, which stands for Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller, which is the rebranded name for DCNM on the NXOS side. So in any case, what you're pointing at here would be that physical or virtual cluster. And we can see here, each one of these has physical nodes. 3 is the minimum. And then, what version basically of Nexus Dashboard software are we running to basically create the cluster. This is not referring to the applications that are running on the Nexus Dashboard. So if we were to click on a Nexus Dashboard, we just basically can see the number of nodes, the number of sites, the number of applications or services. If we click on inventory, again, we get information about the nodes, and they're all healthy, what their serial numbers are, etc. We've got sites, which doesn't have anything to do with the Nexus Dashboard. These are the APIC locations, but the services are the different applications that basically run on top. So you're seeing slightly different naming because as of the most recent versions of software, a number of older components like Network Assurance Engine, this component has been wrapped into Nexus Dashboard Insights 6.0. But this is just a lab. It's just an example. But these are the applications that are running on top of your Nexus Dashboard cluster. Okay, so that's networking. Next, we'll go ahead and move on to storage. So in the case of storage, you can integrate with third-party storage arrays. In your on-premise location, you do that by claiming an Intersight Assist appliance as a reverse proxy, and then leveraging that device for reachability purposes to try and talk to your, in this case, Pure or NetApp storage arrays. Intersight also supports Hitachi storage arrays. So if we click on a storage array, then we get to see details. We can see the vendor, the model, the version of software running on the array, data reduction, total reduction, capacity total, what's used, what's not, how many hosts are attached to the array, and so on and so forth, right? A lot of the terminology you see down here is specific to this particular storage vendor and makes sense. If you click on the inventory tab, then you can see the hosts that are connected to the storage array. Here you can see host group. So if you click on host groups, that's where you can create those groups and memberships. You can see volumes that are configured on the array along with their capacity utilization and data reduction and all of that good information. You've got protection groups. Here we can see the array controllers, and we can see the drives that are providing the storage, and we can see the physical ports that are providing essentially the network Ethernet connectivity and or fiber channel connectivity as shown here. So primarily, right, this isn't really used to configure the storage array, but it does provide useful operational data, right? Because part of managing things successfully is being able to have an accurate inventory of what you have and be able to understand the state of what you have. In the case of storage, like we talked about, what's your data deduplication? how full are your volumes, when might you need to add more storage. All right, so moving on to compute. For the UCS domain, you've got Fabric interconnects, and actually the way I'm gonna do this is up here at the top, and we can really start here on servers if we want. It doesn't really matter. What I want to show you is under filters here. If you scroll down there, you can select management mode, and then you can filter the servers to show only the standalone servers. So this would be like your Cisco C-series devices that you've claimed. And then over here on the right, if you select a server and you click the ellipse on the far right, then you can launch the integrated management controller for that particular server. And so I've already done that here. Unfortunately, this is read-only, and I can't actually, oh, it looks like I can. So if you go to admin, there should be, I wonder if it's under firmware management. No. Well, the idea is that this is how you would do a claim. So let me see if I can find it real quick. Admin, networking, communication services. I would expect to find device connector under here. It's not going to be under either of those. So maybe it's under communication services. Nope. All right, in any case, this probably isn't running the latest version of firmware. So in this particular case, you'd want to update the firmware running on the SIMC, the software, and then it would have the device connector where you can get your device ID claim code, and then you would come back over here to Insight Targets, add a standalone UCSC server, put in the device ID and claim code, and bingo, you've got a connection. So anyway, this just shows that from Intersight, you can basically manage all your C-series servers. You can cross-launch right into the SIMC. Okay, similarly, if we go back, eliminate that filter, scroll back down, choose management mode, and this time say UCS Manager, which means Fabric interconnects that are running UCSM software. Then here on the ellipse, well, not all of them have the capability because not all of them are connected. Let's see if this one has it. Yeah, that's why I open these tabs up proactively. So HX, HV, UCSM. So I suppose I could search that. HX, HV, UCSM. 1 and hit enter. Okay, so I came over here and I right-clicked and I launched UCS Manager. And so this should look very familiar. So if you happen to be in Intersight on the server tab and you basically say launch UCS Manager for that particular server, then it would launch UCS Manager and it would actually bring you down here under, I want to say under that particular server so that you could see what was going on with it. So very easy to move from Intersight into UCSM. And then finally, if I chose a deployment mode, management mode, Intersight, this is referring to Fabric interconnects that run IMM mode. So now you can come over here and, oops, that's not what I wanted. Actually, I think this is for, let's see, RTP, do I have it? OpenTAC, no. Oh, I'm not thinking Intersight managed mode. I'm thinking Hyperflex Cluster. So if I come in and I pick a Hyperflex cluster, then I can then manage or launch Hyperflex Connect, which is basically the UI that allows you to manage the storage layer of your Hyperflex cluster. Okay, so just wanted to show those capabilities. Not going to do a walkthrough of the SimC, UCS Manager, or Hyperflex. I assume you're familiar with those, but those could potentially be videos for the future. All right, so coming back here to Fabric Interconnects, which would be for your UCS domain, you can click on any particular Fabric Interconnect to get more detail, right? We can see the Fabric Interconnect is healthy, although it has been, here it says Fabric Interconnect is not connected, last connected 2 years ago. Okay, many of these haven't been disconnected for 2 years. They may have been disconnected for a couple of days. And the reason for that is because a lot of these Fabric Interconnects are used for scheduled labs in another environment. So they're showing disconnected, but some of them are connected if we search far enough. In any case, you can click on a Fabric Interconnect and you can see all kinds of details about it. So you can see the peer Fabric Interconnect name, you can see the model, the serial number, the management IP, whether or not it's covered under contract, the mode that it's running in, whether it's running UCSM or running in Intersight managed mode, the software, right, the firmware version that's basically running, and so on and so forth. Here you get a nice visual. You can look at the rear view, you can look at the front view. In a lot of cases, you can mouse over and you can actually tell, like, this is port whatever. Show you that as an example when we get to one of the servers. If we look at the connections, like what is connected, actually before I do that, over here on the right, I should point out that there's sections under events for alarms and advisories. And because we're looking at this Fabric Interconnect, the alarms and advisories that you would see here on the screen are context sensitive to this Fabric Interconnect model, firmware version, and all of that, right? So it saves you a lot of time in terms of homework. You right out of the bat, you get kind of like a green light, red light type status. And then for any troubleshooting or security issues, you can refer to the events over here. Now, in terms of what the Fabric Interconnect is connected to, you would click on Connections, and then downstream you've got a chassis, right? So if you click on the chassis, then you've got one 6508 chassis, and if you look at the servers within that chassis, then in this case there's a number of servers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Pretty standard. Okay, so that's Fabric Interconnect. And if you were to drill down to the connected chassis, then you can go find that here. And you could chassis. I'm trying. It looks like I can't click any of these. I don't recall why that is. All right, so I'll skip that for now. Maybe I can get to it from a server. And then within the chassis, we have the servers. So in this case, I will choose Management Mode, UCS Manager. Okay, and then I'm going to click. This is like a B200M3. We can see the number of CPU gigahertz, memory capacity, firmware version, etc., etc. So if we click on one, then here we get a view of the chassis. You get a view of where this particular server is in the chassis, you can mouse over the parts. You can see this is disk 1, this is disk 2. We can look at the top view. A lot of times we can look at the rear view. Again, we have alarms, requests, advisories that are specific to this particular server. You can see the serial number, the model, the license tier in terms of like feature functionality within Intersight, features that you can do, certain features like Untitled Kvm, which we'll talk about a little later, require a certain license tier, whether or not the server is covered under SmartNet, the management mode, and UCS domain that it's a part of, the chassis that it's installed in, etc. So in my mind, I should be able to click on this chassis and then go to the chassis. And then I can also click on the UCS domain, UCSM. That would take me back to the Fabric Interconnects. Okay, so all of these things are linked together. And if I look at inventory information within the server, then I get to see all the underlying components of that particular server, including serial numbers. In terms of actions, I can come up here, I can open a TAC case. Okay, so this is connected TAC. When you're using the SaaS-based version of Intersight, or you're using the connected virtual appliance that has been claimed in Intersight, then you get to take advantage of features like open, what am I trying to say? Connected TAC and auto RMA. Okay, those are just a couple of features. You also get the advisories via that mechanism as well. So when you open a TAC case, what connected TAC means is, TAC is essentially, because this is a SaaS service that's basically run by Cisco, TAC is connected into this service. So they can run, the equivalent of a show tech support on the device that you have opened a TAC case for. They can pull your serial numbers. They can validate that the support contract is valid, and then all of that data will get uploaded to Cisco and put through analytics. And a lot of times, responses to problems can be to a degree automated or made easier for the TAC engineer. On top of that, certain recognized events like a DIM failure in a server can be recognized automatically, and then a TAC case and an RMA issued automatically, and then basically you, the end user, just get an email in your inbox saying, hey, by the way, you've got a DIM that's on its way out in your server. Here's all the information that you need to replace it, and here's the tracking number. It's in the mail. And it's on the truck. It's on its way to you already. All right, the hardware compatibility list. This is really a cool feature of being able to look at your server. So each server, if we expand this out, we've got the server model, and then the hardware compatibility list is essentially cross-checking the server model and whether or not that's compatible with the CPU, whether or not both of those are compatible with the firmware version that's currently running on that server. And here we can see that that is all validated. Then it takes all three of those and it compares them to the operating system and versions. So this might be something like ESXi version 6.7 update 1 or something like that, right? And it's checking to see if ESX and that particular version are compliant with the hardware, the CPU, the firmware, basically compatible, right? Because if it's incompatible, then you may have to update your firmware, you may have to downgrade your software, something along those lines. And then once the hardware and software operating system have all been validated against the HCL successfully, and this is valid, then it gets down into the server hardware and it looks at your adapters, right? So these can be your VNICs and your VHVAs. And if you have any driver problems or conflicts, or you need to update the firmware, then you're notified as to those conflicts, and what you'll see driver versions over here, and you may see what driver version I'm on versus what driver version I need to go to. And if you need to do that, you can come up here and click on Get Recommended Drivers. So in this case, we don't really have an operating system installed on this server, but this could say something like VMware ESX, ESX 6.7 update 1. Here you go, right? So recommended drivers for the MLOM and the various components, and you can just click here, download driver ISO, and then you can use that basically to update your server with the appropriate drivers and establish adapter compliance. So very powerful tool. Ties together a lot of back-end information and compatibility checking, and basically, to a large degree, automates all of that research that you would have to do. The system's really crunching all of that data for you and doing it on your behalf. Okay, so in terms of actions, right, we only see launch UCS manager, open TAC case, and that's just because I don't have administrative rights to this system. So if I did, there would be a lot more actions I could potentially take on the server, and we'll show that here in a little bit. All right, so in terms of chassis, did we click on a chassis? I don't think we could. Yeah, I think these are disconnected or something. I'm not sure why I can't click on them and get details. Fabric interconnects. We'll go ahead and click on one of those. I think we looked at this already. Yep, inventory, connections to the chassis, and so on. All right, so that pretty much covers the UCS hardware operations and various features. Now I'll go ahead and look at the Hyperflex clusters. So we have a number of Hyperflex clusters that we've claimed into Intersight. So I'm just going to click on one and show the kind of information that's available. So, we can see what hypervisor version is running on the nodes that are in this Hyperflex cluster. We can see the Hyperflex version, which really refers to the HXDP Hyperflex Data Platform version. We can see the licensing tier, and we can see our storage capacity, utilization, optimization, and Runway. Runway kind of tells us, when are we going to need to add more storage to our cluster. So here we can see the physical nodes that comprise our Hyperflex cluster, and we get various information, model number, health status, all of that, alarms, requests, advisories, just like on any other on any other similar overview system. Now, if we click on Operate, then we can sort of dive down a little further into the details. So here we see, we should see hosts. I don't know why I don't see any here. VMs that are running on those hosts, data stores provided by the cluster, storage containers, and then the drives within the cluster basically form the storage layer. This usually takes a while to refresh because it's trying to pull all the drive data. So you can see these first 7 have drives in them. This one is a cache drive. The rest of these here are empty. All right, and then if we click on Profile, of course now my screen is frozen. Stop. Oh boy. There we go. I'll click on Profile. This is the profile that was applied to the Hyperflex cluster. So if we sort of jump topics here briefly and we look under Configure, we've got pools, policies, templates, and profiles. And those are constructs and concepts that you should be familiar with from UCS B series running UCSM. You configure various pools, things like MAC address pools, IP pools, UUID pools, WWNN and WWPN pools for your storage, and so on. And then you configure policies. Policies can be things like your BIOS policies, your firmware policies, your local disk policies, your boot order policies, and so on. And you take the pools and the policies that you build, and you aggregate those into a template. And the idea behind a template is that you clone it to create multiple profiles, and each profile is basically a server personality, and that personality is defined by the policies and pools that were in the template that was cloned. And so, as you create multiple server profiles, each server profile will pull the required policies as defined by the template, and it'll also pull values from the pools, right? The IP pools, the MAC pools, and worldwide port name pools, and so on, and assign unique values to that particular profile, and then you deploy that profile onto a physical node, right? A UCS blade server. So, but it's not just UCS blade server or server profiles that you can create. There's multiple types of profiles. Coming back up here to those, UCS, there's 3 different types of profiles you can create for UCS. You can create a domain profile for your fabric interconnects. You can create a chassis profile for your chassis, and then you can create multiple server profiles, one for each of your blade servers. In addition to UCS profiles, you also have the ability to create Hyperflex cluster profiles, which essentially is what we're looking at here. This is the end result after that profile was applied to the Hyperflex cluster. And you can also create Kubernetes cluster profiles. and we'll see that a little later in the video. So now that this profile has been applied to this Hyperflex cluster, we can see all the policies that were basically configured inside of that particular profile, and we can see additional details, right? So we can see the hypervisor is ESX, cluster type Cisco Hyperflex with Fabric Interconnect. We can see Hyperflex DP is the storage and the version of HXDP that's running on the back end, the server firmware, and so on, right? And we've got cluster policies, backup policies, the nodes that are participating in the Hyperflex cluster. So you can see, the hypervisor IP, the storage controller IP, host name, all of that good information. And then here we've got results. This looks like maybe the results of running some kind of process on the server, probably a health check. So if we go to capacity runway, this is where you get an idea of how the storage layer on your Hyperflex cluster is performing, and when will we need to start considering adding additional nodes to our cluster so that we can ramp our storage. And here it says we will exceed 76% of capacity in more than a year. So obviously our utilization on this, because it's in a lab, is super low, but in production, you might see something higher. You can see yourself kind of climbing the hill towards 75%, at which point you're going to want to consider adding additional storage. In terms of performance, this is all about storage performance. So here you can see your input output, your IOPS, your throughput, and your latency. And then here you've got a health check, which is sort of similar maybe to the, you can kind of think of it as somewhat similar functionality to the hardware compatibility list on the UCS servers. But this is actually, it's running the various series of checks for cluster resiliency, cluster infrastructure check, network check, right, to make sure that basically your cluster is healthy. So you get all those responses here. All right, so now moving down to virtualization, the hypervisors. So inside of, say, vCenter, you're familiar with the hierarchy. Just like up here, we talked about the UCS hierarchy of fabric interconnects, connected to chassis, connected to servers. In virtualization, if you think of vCenter, you've got a data center. Within the data center, you've got a cluster or one or more clusters. Within each cluster, you have a number of hosts, and those hosts host your virtual machines. Those virtual machines may have been created from virtual machine templates. The hosts store the virtual machine files in a data store, and you've potentially got data store clusters where the storage is provided by local disk spanning multiple different physical hosts in your cluster. So this provides all of those virtualization hierarchy constructs, and you can drill down. So if I click on a particular data center, so in this case, I'll just click on RTP VDI, then you are now drilling down into that data center. And so whereas prior to clicking on that particular data center, I would have seen all of the clusters in all of the data centers, but now if I click this clusters tab, I'm only going to see the clusters that are in that particular data center. And similarly, if I click on cluster 1, first let me click on hosts. And here we can see cluster 1 and 2. But if I go back to clusters, and then I just click on cluster 1, and then I click on hosts, I should only see the hosts in cluster 1, right? So you can drill down into the environment by doing this, right? And then here, I've got a number of hosts. I can click on host 1, and then I can see the virtual machines that are running on that particular host, and you can see where you're at, right, in the hierarchy right up here. And there's no virtual machines running on this host. But I can also see which cluster is this host a member of, and so in that way I can sort of navigate back to where I was. I can see data stores connected to this host. I can see networking connected to this host, including our standard and DV switches and so on and so forth, and then any virtual machine templates. All right, so going back to the beginning of virtualization, one thing that I want to point out on hosts, because this is a little bit confusing, increase the number of items we can see here, is in this column here where we see data center. When there's a data center listed, that basically is an indicator that we're running ESX or vCenter, right? And you can even see that here in the host name. That was done intentionally. If you scroll down, you'll find here that there's some hosts that are running Intersight Workload Engine, IWE, and there is no concept of a data center there. So, just be aware that when you think of data center, you shouldn't always immediately snap to thinking that that you're not going to see something that isn't vCenter VMware related, right? If you click on data center and drill down to your hosts, you can still see hosts that are not running the vSphere hypervisor. All right. What else? Let's click on one of these Intersight Workload Engine nodes. What we're really looking at here is we're looking at a VM, right? Because basically this Hyperflex cluster, actually I believe this is a Kubernetes cluster, and we'll take a look at that in just a second, right? When you use the IKS, which stands for Intersight Kubernetes Service Functionality of Intersight, to deploy Kubernetes cluster, what it does is it installs virtual machines running Intersight Workload Engine, which we can see here in the name, and that is the hypervisor that runs on top of those VMs, right? And then those VMs use Kubernetes software to cluster together and so on and so forth. So you'll have some master nodes, and you'll have some worker nodes, and all of that. So here we can see the hypervisor type for this VM is IWE. So even though this says host, this is a virtual host, right? And the hypervisor manager is IWE01. Here's the IP address. The Hyperflex cluster that this VM runs in is called London IWE01, and so on and so forth. Now, if we click on performance, we should be able to see, CPU memory and IOPS and all of that type of operational data for that VM. We can see what cluster we're on, which we also saw listed on the general tab. If we click on virtual machines, no virtual machines here. What I would have expected to see here is a master node and a worker node. Okay, and then virtual switches. So when you read about Intersight Workload Engine, it basically says all of the typical things that you would do from like a network segmentation perspective on say an ESXi host where you have system or management traffic, and then you have data plane traffic, and then you have storage traffic. That's all basically deployed automatically for you in a segmented fashion. All right, so I just wanted to point out that when you're looking at hosts, you can be looking at both physical and or virtual hosts. All right, and then finally, Kubernetes. So, here we can see Kubernetes cluster. Let's see, London, Kubernetes is connected. Let's look at this one down here because it's running IWE with IKS like I talked about. So we'll go ahead and click on that Kubernetes cluster. And so we don't see anything here, unfortunately. So we should see some nodes, our masters and our workers. We click on operate, we don't see it. Container runtime. Yep. All right, so it looks like the status has changed since I checked this out a little earlier today. But in any case, you get the idea. You can check out the inventory of your Kubernetes cluster, your nodes, whether they're online, whether they're successfully clustered, and so on and so forth. All right, so that basically covers the Operate tab. Now we're down to configuration. So I had already mentioned pools, things like IP pools and MAC pools and UUID pools. Normally you would come in here, create a pool, define the type, define the parameters, and then you'll wind up with a pool that you can build into a template or a profile. If you come under policies, same basic idea, create a policy, define the type of policy you want to create, and then here we've got like a VLAN policy, flow control policy, port policy for UCS domain. So help define, what are your server ports, what are your uplink ports, are they running Ethernet, are they running fiber channel, and so on and so forth. All right, and then I said you create a template, and then you can combine. Oh, I should show maybe the details of one of each of these things, right? So if we have a pool, maybe I pick Mac pool. And if we come in here, then we can see the details, right, from and to. So this is really just pulling information out of UCSM in this case. But if you were doing IMM, you would actually configure these parameters here in Intersight Manage mode, right? Because for UCSX, all policy is configured here, right? All pools, policies, templates, and profiles for UCSX are configured here. In UCS B series, you would want to go to Operate, go to the Fabric Interconnects, cross-launch into UCS Manager, and you would do all of your policy configuration in this interface. Okay, we didn't look at any policies yet. We'll look at policies. Type, so we'll see a BIOS policy, but system QoS policy, right? Defining your different classes of traffic. Maybe you want to carry fiber channel over your Ethernet network, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then we build out our templates. And if we look inside of a template, then we can see the different types of policies: the BIOS, the boot order, virtual media, virtual KVM, LAN connectivity, storage, etc. And we can see the server profiles that are attached to this template. So when you have this situation, you can't adjust the settings within the server profile because the server profile inherits its setting from the template. But you can detach a server profile from a template and reattach it to a template depending on your needs. Okay, and then once you clone out multiple UCS server profiles, which we'll create up here, remember I said there's 3 different types of UCS, right? You've got your domain, which is for your Fabric Interconnect configuration. You've got your chassis, which is your chassis config, and you've got your UCS server profiles, which are the equivalent of service profiles in UCSM. So if we click on one of these, then we would see sort of the expected stuff, right? All of the policies that were combined into this profile, where this profile has been applied, when the last update to the profile was, any identifiers that were assigned, so things like pools, IDs, connectivity of the server, VNets, VHVAs. I don't know why in this lab environment these things aren't showing up. If we look at this particular server, then again we kind of get the front view, the rear view, right? This is PS1, this is adapter port 3, right? We can look at the top view, we can see the CPUs, the DIMMs, all the numbers, all the internal fans, and so on, right? And you can see total resources. You can turn on and off the locator LED. You can see all your alarms, requests, and advisories. You can get your serial number, see if it's covered under contract, with actions. I think we're back here on the General tab. I guess I would actually have to click on the server. This here, I'd have to take that, go into Operate, go into Servers, search that server, and then basically open a tap case from there if I was having trouble. And then inventory is similar to the Operate server view, right? When you look at inventory, you get to see all the components and parts and all the particulars and status there, right? So you can see the CPUs, they're in operable status and so on, so you can see if there's any problems. And you can very easily expand everything here by clicking expand all, collapse all. Gives you a nice quick view of what your hardware status looks like. Okay, so all of that can be used. to create your UCS profiles. You can also create Hyperflex cluster profiles that would then be applied to your cluster. So in this case, here's London HX cluster 02 profile, and this is where we defined all of those policies. Now, again, I don't have administrative access, so I can't add any policies, but this is exactly where that happened, right? And then once the profile was created, then you need to deploy it to your cluster. All right, and then in addition, you can also create Kubernetes cluster profiles. It says here, welcome to Intersight Kubernetes service. It's a distinct license-based feature available by Intersight. All features in Intersight are available on a 90-day trial, by the way. So that can be enabled under settings, I think licensing, when you first bring up the system or first create your Intersect.com account. So this is where you would create your Kubernetes cluster profile. Looks like we've got one running here, RTP, but again, I can't click on it, and I'm not sure why. I was able to do that earlier today. So this is a dynamic lab environment. I'm not the only one using it. It's being used by others. There's scheduled labs and such, so maybe things are getting disconnected based on the usage of other people. But in any case, this is where you would create your cluster profiles. Okay, now last item under configure is orchestration, and this has to do with Intersight Cloud Orchestrator. It has a very similar look and feel to UCS Director, if that's something that you're familiar with. However, this is not UCS Director. They are two different products, and you cannot import your workflows from UCS Director into Intersight. Okay, so whatever workflows you have here, you built here in Intersight Cloud Orchestration Tool and not in UCS Director. Now, you did notice on the Monitor tab that we had a UCS Director tab up there. So what does that mean? It means that you can claim UCS Director as a target. So if you already have an instance of UCS Director and a bunch of workflows built out, you can point at that instance of UCS Director as a target, onboard that into Intersight, and what that allows you to do is when you're building your ICO workflow, your Intersight Cloud Orchestration workflows that you're seeing here on the screen, you can then call workflows from UCS Director, and they'll be executed on the instance of UCS Director. You can then, return information back into Intersight Cloud Orchestrator. So the intent behind ICO is that it's a low-code drag and drop type designer interface. So if I click on, say, for example, my workflows, and I click on NetApp ICO, this is the graphical user interface, the drag and drop designer. There's a number of tabs in here. You can see sort of general information about your workflow, and if I had administrative rights, this is where I would define my workflow inputs. The designer is where I can, design my workflow, connect different stages of my workflow in serial fashion, right? So that one thing gets done before the next. I can take input. If I want to create a new storage virtual machine, probably want to name it. So that would be one of the inputs. I probably then want to pass that name down to subsequent steps in my workflow, so that when it executes this, it knows to do it against the right storage virtual machine, and so on and so forth. So that's what's referred to as inputs and outputs. You can stitch that all together here, and there's a library. You can kind of see the color coding here is green for storage. It's pink for virtualization. So there is a task library, essentially, of commonly performed tasks that you can drag and drop into this interface and assemble into workflow. If needed, you can also use SDKs to write custom code to create your own tasks that you can then include in your workflows. And mapping has to do with sort of carrying the inputs from your workflow into your tasks and sort of passing those between tasks and so on and so forth. The code tab shows you basically a JSON view of what would be implemented, right? This is the capturing the intent of your workflow in code fashion. This would essentially be executed to achieve your desired result. And then history basically will show different versions of your workflow over time, and you can see how things either changed or were executed. I'm not 100% positive what this is showing here. Okay, so again, orchestration probably deserves a video of its own, so we're not going to spend much time on it. And that wraps up the configure tab. Now under optimize, we have overview, and this brings us into Intersight Workload Optimizer functionality. So this is enabled via licensing, and then once the license is applied, then the optimize menu will show up in the user interface. Otherwise, it won't. There's other sort of similar dynamic behaviors to that also, where for example, under configure, I think pools, policies, templates, and profiles don't show up until you actually claim a UCS fabric interconnect of some kind, right? Whether that's running UCSM or IMM. All right, so I actually did another video on Intersight Workload Optimizer, and I kind of talked through all of this. So I'm not going to do that again here, but just want you to know that it's here. All right, so now we're down to admin. We already talked about targets. Here is UCS Director, so this is where you can basically configure your integration with an instance of UCS Director. And then finally, you have a software repository, all built in. So you can upload firmware images and OS images, OS config files like ESI kickstart files, and so on. And then, when you're, say, operating a server and you want to install an operating system, you would come in and you would select a server and then go to the ellipses on the far right and select the action that you want to do. And that would be, for example, install operating system. Now you don't see it because I don't have admin access, but what I did do is here, this section of, this is one of the basically virtual environments. This is the virtual environment that I'm currently running. It is a dcloud lab or instant demo called Getting Started with Cisco Intersight version 3. And then I click this link here and it brought up this documentation. And this is the entire scenario. It will walk you through this entire environment just like I just did. But it's all in writing, screenshots, it's all there. So good information. If you scroll all the way up to the top, actually there's a download link right here. So this is actually like a PDF style book that you can keep for your reference also. So one of the functions that you can use to make server management easier is called tunneled Virtual Kvm. So back here in this interface, if I had administrative rights, I'd be able to click this and then find that option, right? Launch tunneled Virtual Kvm. So what is that? Well, you got to remember that I'm currently logged into intersight.com, which is out on the internet, and I want to manage a server that's located on-prem. And the way that that happened was by claiming a target, establishing that outbound tunnel to Intersight, and then basically this requires no VPN, right? So you're leveraging the Intersight tunnel and infrastructure to basically manage your on-prem servers. It's very convenient, and that requires a certain licensing level also. Okay, so a couple of key points, right? Review the following important requirements and considerations. Tunneled KVM is supported only for Cisco UCS C-Series, standalone M4, M5, and M6 servers, UCS S-Series, Hyperflex HX Series Edge standalone M4 and M5 servers with an Advantage or Premier license. So the minimum Intersight license level for tunneled KVM is Advantage. Now, I started this conversation because I said there would be more operational items next to your servers. So here you can see all servers, operate servers. You select a server over here. You come over to the ellipses on the right, and you've got all these different options. So you can, power up, power down, restart. I'm not sure what the system operations are. Import a server profile would be used on a C-Series. That would actually take all the configured parameters off the C-Series, create a server profile, You could then edit that server profile and apply it back to the C-Series box, and it would actually update the configuration, which sort of basically converts a standalone C-Series into the equivalent of what we've been used to with UCS B-Series on the UCSM managed Fabric Interconnects for so many years. You can install an operating system, so this is where you may pull an image or upgrade firmware, where you may pull an image from that internal Intersight software repository. And this makes it really convenient, right? You've got KVM access, you've got integrated management controller access built right in to Intersight interface, right? So it makes it super easy to manage all your infrastructure, install your operating system. It's less points and clicks than it used to be. It's the streamlined process, and it's all done from one central portal. Launch tunneled KVM, and you can open a tag case, and you can set a license tier, I suppose, on individual resources. So if you were to come over here on the left and select multiple servers, you'll notice that up at the top here, there's another ellipse. And so this ellipse is for multi-server actions, right? So maybe you do a power restart on 4 servers all at once. You would do that here. But if you want to do single server actions, you would select the checkbox next to that one server. You'd come to the ellipse, and you basically choose the option that you're looking to execute. All right, so last bit here. On intersight.com/help, there's a resources section, and the first resource listed in the resources section is called the Cisco Intersight Handbook, and I'm showing that here. So, install an operating system, power cycle, hard reset. These are the different server action details that are in this menu here, right? Under operate, servers, pick a server, ellipse, single server action. So everything is described inside of this Intersight Handbook. It's a really great reference, and I highly recommend that you read it to get familiar with Intersight functionality and how these new features and optimizations, streamlined workflows all work. All right, my throat is sore. I hope that was a good introduction and walkthrough to Intersight. If you're new to the technology, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Again, my name is Dan Friedman, and I'm a data center TSA at Cisco. Thanks for watching.